In a previous video comparing boutique strats, I played 3 solos over the same backing track, 2 of which were as genuinely and fully improvised as I could make it, and 1 was a more partially written or structured solo. I then asked you fine people to let me know in the comments which of the 3 you thought was the structured or written solo. So if you haven't seen that video, I'd highly recommend that you watch it first, as it will make a lot more sense of this one, and the link is in the description below. Cutting to the chase, take 1 on the yellow K line and take 3 on the gold Sir were in fact the improvised solos. That means that take 2 on this beautiful blue Fibonacci was in fact the structured or partially written solo. The comments and the feedback was super interesting because maybe 70–80% of you did get it correct. And what I thought I'd do in this video is analyze and break down those 3 solos, as there were some clues to give the game away throughout. And also I thought it'd be interesting to unpack my thought processes of what I think is going on in my mind as I'm improvising versus when I'm writing, and how these things interact with one another. But first of all, why am I running this experiment in the first place? What's the point of these 2 videos? Well, there's a couple of reasons, and the first is that I just think it's a really interesting subject to explore, the blurry line between what is and isn't improvisation, and how I might define improvisation differs from how you might. And secondly, as I post more and more content to YouTube, I want to be very clear and transparent about where I'm at with my guitar playing. And I never want to give the impression or lead you to believe I'm a much better guitarist or better improviser than I actually am. And by better, what I mean is that you don't come away from my videos with the false impression that I'm always constantly improvising everything to a high level, because it's just not the case, and I wouldn't want to do that. On this channel, you're going to see a lot of improvisation, but you're also going to see some shorter, constructed, composed solos, and I want to be trying to be clear about the difference. And I think this is quite important because whilst in the short term, it might seem to be better to grow an audience, cultivate a following by always putting this curated, perfect vision forward, and maybe implying that I'm improvising things when I'm not. Long term, I don't think this is healthy, not for my own mental health, and also I think for the audience as well, and for the general health of the guitar community, to be constantly seeing and thinking that everybody is always this perfect blank slate of endless creativity and is executed on video perfectly all the time. It's just not the case. If your initials are not GG or one of the GOATs, it's probably not going to be the case. It's definitely not for me. It's a subject that comes up all the time on the Guitar Hour podcast. This is a show that I co-host with Tom Quayle, Dan Smith, and Jake Wilson. And as improvising musicians, generally, this is a subject that's near and dear to our hearts. And we each put different value and weight on the fully 100% improvised solo. But what we all are very much in agreement on is the nature of being transparent about it. Yeah, and if you don't know about the podcast, do go and check it out. It's the Guitar Hour, and links are in the description below. You'll get to hear us 4 argue and banter about these sorts of things all the time. It's great fun. Personally, myself, I adore improvisation, and in the context of jazz and fusion or a jazz standard, that open highway to just explore, chorus after chorus of trying to be as free and creative as I can is a wonderful thing. I'm going to be sharing lots of that on the channel. But also, if I'm making like a product demo or doing something with a track that's composed and I have a short section to solo, the chances are that's going to be more composed or structured. Also, I think sometimes the very nature of composing a track while you're working on that and producing it, I can't help but start to hear ideas as the production of making the drums and the bass and the backing guitars or keys is going along. Melodic ideas start to form. And this is, getting into it now, but this blurry line between what is and isn't improvised and composed. And because on this channel you will see these 2 things, I just want that to be really clear and out there, so there is no confusion that it's all improvised all the time. I thought these videos would be an interesting way of exploring the difference and just being honest and transparent about it. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so let's get into it and break down and analyze these 3 solos, and I'll share what I think I'm thinking about and the processes that happened for those 3 takes to become a reality. So just as a reminder, takes 1 and 3 were as fully improvised as I could make them under my definition. But given that I see it as impossible to be a continual blank slate, even the process of putting together this little experiment meant the first early improvisation would go on to influence what I would write in the second. take, and then what I would write would further go on to further influence what I would improvise in the third take. And I just find this really fascinating. This it just highlights to me this blurry line between what is and isn't improvised. So yes, of course, that means that take two was the written solo. However, structured might be a better way of describing it. And what I mean by this is that the overall shape of the solo and the slower, more melodic phrases were planned out, but the faster 16th note triplet legato bits were still improvised, again, under my definition. And I'll explain what I mean by this fully as I go through take two later on. There were also some bigger set pieces in take two as well. So let's go through, watch the solos, and analyze what I think I'm doing and thinking. Now, this was the literal first take this afternoon, and you can sort of tell from the space that I'm leaving, certainly in the very intro, as I'm sort of feeling it out and just waiting for the track to come in. But then in the first few bars, I'm really kind of leaving a lot of space, and you can tell there's some sort of fluff and errors in my rhythmic control at various points. So if I just wind it back a little bit. So that's not perfectly executed in terms of swing 16th feel there. And then going on. That's nice, that's quite good. That's quite good. Okay, so here's the first longer improvised legato line. And again, you can tell this is the first take because I kind of screw up some of the rhythmic control and subdivision halfway through it. So just. There, you can hear I lose track of the 16th note triplet there. So this was very much a warm-up take. You can hear. There are some cool melodic ideas though. That I was really pleased with as I came out with that. That was, you know, as genuinely improvised as it could be, and you know, I was quite pleased with that idea. And there the 16th triplet control is coming, starting to get a little bit better there. Again, some space. It's quite cool. Okay, and this first solo take gave birth to this really cool idea that I don't execute correctly until the final take. And it's one of the clues is to give away which is the written ones and which is the improvised ones. So this line, this little lick here is really quite cool, and I might do a lesson breakdown on it at some point. Let me find it again. That little idea there, it's like it's a string skipped legato with a 2-1 idea. So it kind of was going for this. And I don't execute it right. The idea is kind of there in my head, but it doesn't execute right. I then go on to try and force it in the written take. It also doesn't work. And funnily enough, by the third improvised take that I do, I actually come out with something that I was really pleased with. Yeah, but we'll go through that in just a moment. But I quite like that. It's quite cool. And by the end lick there, again, I've kind of locked in that. Okay, so that was the first take. As I say, it's very much a lot of space going on, which I think is a good thing. I quite like that first take as it happens in the end, despite the sort of fluffs and lack of precision with the sort of rhythmic control. Okay, so the biggest giveaway as to this being the written one is the time of day it was shot. You can tell that it's in the evening. Now, the first take was very much in the late afternoon where there was still some light, and I'd left the kind of crack of the blind open, so you can see the light change, and it's not perfectly the same. and that kind of gives it away. I really liked that opening line from the first improvised take, and I used that as a springboard for the opening of the written one, so you can hear that idea coming in here. So just that opening, very similar to the improvised opening line. You can hear there by this point the swing 16th feel, the da 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 kind of feel, is more in control with this melody that's more structured. And there's a cool little predetermined idea, bluesy lick. I might do a lesson on that actually too. Okay, right, so here's another big giveaway. It's the quality of the melodic ideas that immediately follow the faster legato stuff. So in takes 1 and 3, they don't really have this, as I'm sticking the landing, but I'm not immediately going into something that's quite, well, in my opinion, is not fully thought out and strong melodically. Whereas in this one, coming out of that faster legato part, yeah, so that I feel is a little too good and on the nose. Interestingly, I don't actually execute a lot of that faster triplet legato stuff, 16th note triplets legato stuff there particularly well. But I do stick the landing, and then I come out of it immediately into this kind of strong kind of melodic idea, which 1 and 3, whilst I stick the landings, they don't then go on into super strong melodic ideas. And there again is that line I liked, the 2-1-2-1. That one. And when I say it's worked out, it's only like I knew I was going to do that kind of lick at that point. I didn't like plan every note. I just kind of knew the shape and the rough idea, and that's what I knew I was going to do at that point in the solo. Now, as I say, later on in take 3, I actually nail it. I feel like I get the version of that I liked. This in the written structured solo of take 2, still not quite there. But again, it goes into something quite cool that's a bit too on the nose. Just find that again. Immediately into that sort of melody. Okay, so that big long legato line there, I knew where I was starting and I knew where I was stopping going into these kind of these 6 ideas, but every note along the way wasn't planned. That is just something, a skill I have, where I know that I can improvise for a prescribed number of beats or bars in my mind and start and stop at certain points. But yeah, and I knew I was going to start at that point on the bar and finish at this point where I'm going into these kind of sliding 6th ideas. And it's the sliding 6th ideas that are the composed part here. So I'll just show you that again. So here it starts the improvised legato. And then it comes into, I knew at that point, these sliding 6th. And here we have the set piece, and this is a really interesting debate as to, I think, whether this is improvising or not. So I have this ascending idea with this sort of concertina kind of expansion, compression, legato thing. go straight into then take 3. So this is something that I've worked on, but it's not perfect and manipulable in every sense, improvisationally, of course. So it's interesting to think like how improvised is this kind of an idea. So this is what I think I played on the solo. Something like that. But I've worked on that enough, that kind of fragmented kind of ascending idea, that I can do it on different string sets in different keys. So I could do it down here, say. Or change key and do it in a different key, like. But is that really improvising? I don't know. I guess it's an interesting question. Like, for example, one of my big jazz heroes, Jonathan Kreisberg, in fact, I probably got this kind of an idea from him. He's got a very common kind of lick or line that he does, which is like triplet 16th notes across sort of certain 3 strings. And he can obviously manipulate this in all kinds of tonalities, but it's definitely a thing you hear that's more of a set kind of idea. Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Take 3 was also a fully improvised solo, and I'm air quoting because at this point, by the recording of this take, it's the next morning, and it's really hard to not start forming expectations of myself and to be influenced by what I've been writing and playing on previous takes. And creatively, to make this video work, I do choose to start my pickup note on the last note from the previous written take. So it's interesting how all these things interact, whether we like it or not. So just coming out of take 2. The last note I end on is the first note on the Sir solo. You can hear now, or at least I can hear, much more control by this point in this subdivision and this tempo with these faster legato triplets. That's sounding pretty cool. And melodically as well, it's almost a best of both worlds on this one. It's not perfect by any means, but I do quite like aspects of it. And I did try to stay improvised. That's quite cool little motif there with the bending and the triplets ascending. Yeah, that coming out of that legato bit into that sort of melody part was quite cool. And here is the lick that I really liked from both the first and second takes, but I actually improvised this now and I land it. Yeah, that's cool. I really like that. There's also more space in this one again. I mean, lots and lots of notes still, but more space as compared to the second take. And that's also interesting. There's some sliding 6th action there, which was definitely improvised. Here. Okay, so that's definitely improvised. I hadn't planned that, but obviously it was influenced based off of what I wrote the night before on the second take. And then we've got a stretchy, wide pentatonic idea. You can tell it's next morning here because the crack in the blind is letting the light bleeding, which is an accident. I think this might be my favourite, not best, but perhaps my favourite take of the 3, in that I'm sort of executing the technique quite well and controlled and improvising it. And there's also some space, some nice melodic ideas. I don't know, it's hard to say really. I think they've all got strong points and some obviously negative weak points to it. But I do like the idea that 1 and 3 are as fully improvised as I can make them, and they've got a little bit more air and breathing room to them. Okay, so before we start winding things down, I wanted to briefly talk about the faster 16th note triplet legato stuff, because it could be quite hard to believe that this is improvised. But again, under my definition, none of this is predetermined large licks. And whilst there's some elements that are repeated, it's very much, to my mind, manipulable and improvised. And ironically, this is not that difficult at this tempo for me, as compared to the more slower melodic ideas. I could kind of do this all day, given that my current visualization and technical ability. I've put enormous amounts of work over the years into controlling these types of legato ideas at very slow tempos in an improvised manner, and it builds up over time to the point where you can do it faster in more real-time scenarios. Not in all tempos and all subdivisions, of course. I absolutely can't do that. But this track and this tempo is kind of the sweet spot for 16th notes, given my current visualization and technical ability. I'm going to demonstrate that in just a moment. And someone commented on, I think, the Instagram post of this, very astutely, that they heard takes 1 and 3 as having my go-to things that I have for improvisation, whereas take 2 is a bit different. And I think that really is on the money. You can hear the sort of repeatable small chunks of things that I do when I'm improvising with this technique. And these chunks, a little bit like Lego bricks, are kind of pieced and bolted together to kind of make the bigger kind of spaff or the big lines. Now, the crucial difference here between this and learning large predetermined licks verbatim that you can kind of execute is that this is still, to my mind, very much improvised. And this is because I'm taking very small chunks of muscle memory and then combining them, and I'm able to manipulate them in real time. So to me, that still feels like it's more improvised. Whilst there will be some things that are repeated accidentally, it's far, far more likely that each idea is going to be different every time, while still sounding familiar. And to me, and my definition, as I've said all along, that is more improvised. Whether you like listening to it, of course, is an entirely different matter, but it's enormous fun to do and when you've worked on it. Now, this might be hard to believe if you can't do this or you're just starting to learn to do it, but I want to demonstrate that this very much is the case. So what I'll do is I'll put the track on and I will just give myself the limitation and requirement that I want to play a full bar of these 16th note triplets and improvising it. So. So that's what's going on there. What I'm able to do is control the start and stopping points of these legato sections, and in between those start and stopping points is this improvised little chunks, combinations of these little pieces of muscle memory. Now, this isn't the place to teach you how to do that. I may do some lessons based on how I practice this stuff later on, but of course you must check out Tom Quayle's material on this. His legato lessons are legendary, so do check out his material if you wanted to learn how to do this stuff. And yeah, I wanted to show you that this isn't the roadblock for me. Doing what might seem on the surface level, the faster, more impressive stuff, that's not really the roadblock for making, I think, good improvisations. It's much more about the melodic phrasing and the contour of things and how to weave that in amongst the faster playing. So let me know in the comments what you think about improvised solos. Are they important to you? What value do you place on them versus composed solos? Does it matter to you if somebody writes a solo and then either implicitly or explicitly leads an audience to believe that it was inspiration in the moment and just off the cuff? I suppose in the last few years, a lot of the argument online has been around the idea of speeded up or edited or not even playing. So maybe this is all moot and irrelevant. But I do feel like there's a good chunk of people out there, aspiring players, intermediates, that are looking around and just constantly in awe and bewilderment at how amazing everyone seems to be all the time. And I just want to put my flag on the ground and say, that's not me. And I think this is all about, for me, sharing this journey of continually improving and just being honest about what I'm up to. We talk, discuss, and argue about this stuff all the time on the Guitar Hour podcast. So if you want to hear myself, Tom Quayle, Dan Smith, and Jake Wilson chat all things guitar life, then do check that out. Link is in the description. If you've enjoyed this video, then do consider hitting the like button. And if you want to see more, hit subscribe and ring the bell for notifications of when I post new videos. You can get guitar lessons and courses with me over at my website at davidbb.com, and you could check out my app Solo for building your fretboard visualization and your changes playing skills. It's available in the iOS App Store and the Google Play Store. Thanks so much for watching, and until the next video, bye-bye.